All right, let's start with our sponsors for the week. Mr. Loiterman from Norfolk, Virginia is our sponsor.
Is he Mr. or is he a rabbi?
He is, sorry?
Is it Mr. or is he a rabbi?
He is Mr. He is Mr. He often gets promoted to rabbi in his mailings and things, but yeah. Okay. But he is a proud Daf Yomi listener in Norfolk, Virginia, and the father of the Magid Shiur. And so he is doing a great job in promoting our Shiur from Norfolk. And Daf Yomi is also sponsored this week by Rabbi Glenn Black of NCSY, L'Zecher Nishmas Nechemia ben Yaakov, Zichrono Levracha. And today's Daf is sponsored by Reuven and Sarah Durbach, B'zchus Refuah Shlema for Ephraim ben Shifra. All right, here we go. Tanan Hassam, we are on Kuf Ayin Aleph Amud Beis. We are at Tanan Hassam, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wide, fifth wide line towards the middle. Tanan Hassam. We learned in a Mishnah over there, which will serve as our review a little bit to get us caught back into things. Shtari chov hamuk damin psulin. If you write a contract and you date it too early, that contract is invalid, as we have described in the past. V'hamucharin kisherin. But if I post date the contract, that's going to be okay. Amar Rav Hamnuna says, Lo shana el shtari halva. This is only true of loan documents, of loan contracts, of al shtari mekoch memkar. But when it comes to sales contracts, afilu muchar nami psulin, I'm not going to allow you to do even sales contracts. My taima, what is the reason why sales contracts, even later contracts, even contracts with a post-dated sales contracts are not valid? Because zimni demizavin le ara b'nisan. Let's say the person sells the land in Nisan. Vikasiv le b'tishrei, and then they don't write the contract. They write the contract that it was done in Tishrei. So now the contract is post-dated by 6 months. Umisrami le zuze beini. Meanwhile, sometime between Nisan and Tishrei, the fellow who sold the land gets some money, and he wants to buy his land back. V'zavin le'minei, so he buys his land back from the purchaser. V'chimati Tishrei, now Tishrei comes. Mapik le, comes the purchaser, who is now the seller again, because he sold the land back, and he's going to take out this sales contract, and he's going to say, V'amar le hadar zamanti minach. Look, it says here that I bought it back from you in Tishrei, so therefore, I'm going to collect it again. It's hard to steal land because you can't bring it anywhere. So land, you can only occupy land illegally, but stealing land is not something that we're that concerned about, right? Can't walk away with it. Okay, well, if this is the case, if this is in fact the case, so then why would it be any different between a sales contract and a loan contract? Because after all, Zimnin de Yazif Benisan, I could wind up with the same sort of a scenario. Let's say the loan actually took place in Nisan, and we write the contract and we post-date it for Tishrei. Okay, so now we post-date the contract 6 months ahead. Umisrami lezuzi beini, and the borrower finds that he gets some money in the meantime during the 6 month period. Uparale, and he repays the debt. Vamarle havli shtarai, and he goes back to the lender and he says, okay, here's the money, give me my contract back. Vamarle irkasli, and the fellow who's the lender says, I lost it. I lost the contract. Vikasivle tavra, so what do? They agree that he will write a receipt.
If he lost the contract, maybe I made it up and pretended to lose it, but really he had it.
That is possible. That's always a possibility, right? We are concerned for that. And this, in fact, as we're going to see, he's going to be a little bit less than scrupulous, because whether he was pretending to have lost it or he really did lose it, he eventually finds it. And now, the chimati zmaneh, when the loan comes due, when the actual date in the contract comes up, mapik le, he's going to take his original contract back out that he never tore up because he either pretended he lost it, as Yehuda is suggesting, or he actually really lost it but found it again. V'amar le, hani hashtahu diazavta minoi, you just borrowed money from me. So, and you're going to bring out your receipt and show me that you repaid it, but the receipt is going to be dated sometime between Nisan and Tishrei, and which case,
problematic.
Which is going to wind up not proving that you didn't, in fact, it's not going to prove that you paid the loan back, because it's going to be dated too early compared to the contract now that says that a loan took place. So these are all cases that we've had before, so we understand and we recognize this. So what the real question that we're bringing is, according to this Mishnah, since this is a nice review of many of the cases we've already seen, why is it that this Mishnah seems to allow us to write post-dated loan contracts, despite the fact that we have this concern? It doesn't allow us to write post-dated sales contracts because of a concern that they'll buy it back and play and the seller will play this game. But we're not worried about a lender playing the game of getting his loan repaid twice. So the answer is because this Mishnah Kasavar in Kosvin Shover. This Mishnah is of the opinion that we don't write receipts, and that's why it's relevant to our Gemaras, because up until this point we sort of didn't consider the idea whether you write receipts, you don't write receipts. But now this is the issue of the day. Do I write receipts? Do I not write receipts? This is a circumstance where writing a receipt is actually going to lead to problems. So therefore, if I hold that I don't write receipts, what would happen? If I came to repay the loan early and you said I lost the contract, I would say, very nice, have a nice day. I guess I'll keep the money. When you find that loan contract, come and see me. I'm glad to pay you back, but I can't pay you back until you return.
Then you have no proof you've got lost the receipt.
So you'll have no proof that it was repaid, so therefore I'm not going to pay you the money until you find it. In which case, it would be impossible for the person to collect twice, because if he pulls his contract out at some future time, then I'll pay it then. And if he doesn't pull out his contract, I'm never going to return him the money. Amar le Rav Yemar le Rav Kahana. Rav Yemar says to Rav Kahana, V'amri lo Rav Yirmiyah midifti. Some says Rav Yirmiyah midifti le Rav Kahana. V'ha'idna. Nowadays, he says, let's talk about what goes on now. Dechasvin and shtari mu'chari v'kasin and tavra. We have the halachic practice. We are writing receipts these days. As he says, in these days we're writing receipts, and we're also post-dating contracts. Those two things shouldn't go together, because if you post-date contracts and you write receipts, then you're going to wind up with this problem. So, amai kavdina hachi, why do we do this? Even though this is in parentheses, the Marsha says we take this out, but the Bach says we can put it back in. Sorry, who is the Bach? On the side of the Gemara here, it has notes on Girsos, on notes on the texts, and corrections are often made to the text based on his view. So therefore, sometimes he'll say, add this word, take this word out. So he puts the note, leave this in. He feels this is a question-answer part of the Gemara. The Marsha was another Rishon says, no, we're going to take this out, but we're going to leave it in. So he says, why are we having this circumstance where we've got post-dated contracts and we've got receipts? That's a recipe for disaster.
It could be a fraud.
And that's where the fraud's going to come in. So the answer is Basra, the Amar Luhu Rabbi Abba L'Safrei. He says now that Rav Abba said to his Sofrim, he told his Sofrim something to write into the contracts that's going to prevent the problem. Kikas vinu shtari me'uchari, he said, if you're going to write a post-dated contract, kasvu hachi, add into the contract the follow. Shtar dinon, this contract of ours, lo bismane kasvene, was not written at the time of the loan. If you add that in, ela acharnuhu v'kasvanuhu, rather we post-dated this. Now, if that happens, if somebody comes along with a receipt, and then the guy comes up and says, but wait, your receipt predates the contract, we're going to say, yeah, but your contract says that it was post-dated, so therefore we're going to pair these two things up. That's a solution. Amalei Ravashi, now Ravashi is a later Amora, and Ravashi comes along and he says to Rav Kahana, v'ha'idna, nowadays, in also saying to Rav Kahana, Diloka avdinon hachi, we don't do that. Basra damar le Rav Safra le Safrei. So he says now that Rav Safra said to his Sofrim, he says we don't do that. So the question is, how do we not put this statement into the contracts? We're going to have problems again. So he says, well, Rav Safra told his Sofrim, ki kasvisu hani tavri I yediasu zibna dishtara kasvu ilo kasvu stama. He says, if you're going to know the date, the actual date that the loan took place, put that in the contract. If you don't know the date, the actual date the loan took place, and it's not today, leave it blank. Don't put it into the contract at all. Then people will see the contract, and they'll say it's an undated contract. It must be related to this receipt that is being taken. So that's another solution, right? You can either write into the contract, this date is not proper, or you can eliminate and leave the date out. Amar le Ravina le Ravashi. Ravina says to Ravashi, Vamri le Ravashi le Rav Kahana. And some said it was another follow-up question. The Ravashi asked Rav Kahana, and he says, Veha, deha idna delo kavdin hachi. He says, yeah, but I'm looking at our contracts, and people are not doing that either. So what do we have to say about that? So Amar Lei, so he said back to him, Rabbanan tekuni tekine, man de ovid ovid, man de lo ovid, ihuhu da'afsid anafshe. He says, well, the rabbis have explained to you how to solve this problem. You could write some very simple things into a contract and prevent the problem. If you didn't write those things into your contract and somebody tricks you with this receipt, then that's your own fault. You fell into the trap. There were some very simple ways to avoid the problem. Either don't accept a receipt, or don't write a post-dated, or when you don't write a post-dated contract, or if you're going to write a post-dated contract, don't put the date in, or if you're going to write a date in, write in it that it's not the right date. Lots of solutions. If you didn't do any of those solutions, that's not on us anymore. That's what he says. Amar lu Rava bar Rav Shila lahanu kasvishtara aknaisa. So Rava bar Rav Shila said to those that write a contract of acquisition, ki kasvisu shtari aknisa iya diisu yoma diknisu bei kisvu. He says, if you're going to know what date is the real date of the contract, write that date into the contract. That's a good idea. But the lo kasvu yoma dikaimisu bei. But if you're going to write a contract and today's not the day that the actual loan took place, so he says, so then don't write it in. Don't write any date in. Why? We don't want contracts to look like lies. The bottom line is, if you're writing today's date and the loan didn't take place today, that's an indication that this contract has some falsehood in it, and it's going to make us suspicious of this contract. But
nowadays you have certain contracts that make you look like a liar. Even nowadays,
not if you write them. I mean, you're supposed to write them truthfully, right? That's the idea. Don't write things down that are not true. Mm-hmm. That's the bottom line of it. Amar Rav l'safrei. Also, Rav said to his sofrim, V'chein amar lehu Rav Huna l'safrei. Rav Huna also told this to his sofrim, Ki kaimisu b'shili, kisvu b'shili. If the document is being written in the city called Shili, write in the document, this document is written in Shili. Even if the document is going to get handed over in another city called Hini, Ki kaimisu behini, kisvu behini. And also, if you're going to be in the city called Hini, write it in Hini. Say that it was written in Hini, even if it's going to be handed over in Shili. We're often tempted to go a little bit above and beyond. We know we're going to write this contract, but it's going to be taken care of in right. We're in Toronto, but we'll be giving this contract over in Vaughan. So therefore, let's be a little bit clever and let's write this contract from Vaughan, and because that's when it's going to be delivered. No. Wherever it's written, just write accurately, right? According to if the contract was written in Healy, write Healy. If it was written in Shili, write it in Shili.
And put the government stamp on it.
So therefore, you should avoid. But this way, you're going to avoid anything inappropriate in a contract. Amar Rava. Let's say there's a fellow and he's got a contract for a loan that's 100 zuz. He says, you know what, I want to cash this in. I'd like to make it 2 contracts of 50. So lo mashvinan lahu, we do not let him do that. He can't trade in his contract, his one loan document that says $100 loan for 2 contracts that say 50 each. My taima, what's the reason? Because by not allowing such a thing, it actually has a benefit to the lender and a benefit to the borrower. Why is it better for the lender? Because, as we said, when somebody has a partially paid contract, the custom was to write a receipt for the amount that was paid. And then the borrower would hold on to the receipt, indicating that he paid. Well, the borrower is going to get nervous. If I lose my receipt, then the lender is going to come and collect from me a second time. So that's going to encourage him to pay off the rest as fast as he can so that he can get the original contract back and tear it up.
Has it ever happened where the lender forgot to give the receipt and then he had to go?
Everything I'm sure has happened, right? Everything has happened, right? But the case here is that this would be beneficial for the lender for the lender, right? Because this way he's going to get the borrower to pay him back faster. Okay. And also doing this is going to be good for the borrower, because the contract that the lender has is going to be called a damaged contract. How so? Because it's going to be partially paid. So what's going to happen is that this this borrower is going to come to repay the rest of if the lender comes to get the rest of his loan repaid, he's going to admit that half of it was already paid. Well, we have in the in halacha something called moda b'miktzas ataina, somebody who admits to partial of the claim. If somebody admits to partial of the claim, he has to take an oath in order to collect. So therefore, if this fellow comes along and says, I've got a contract that says you owe me $100, and the borrower says, but I already paid you $50, and the lender says, you're right, you did pay me $50. At that point, if the lender wants to get his money back, he has to go to Beis Din and he has to take an oath that he didn't get the rest. Well, that's going to be nice, because now if the lender does actually give him another $5 or $10 off without getting a receipt or whatever, this lender's going to be in a position based on the first 50 of having to take an oath. And that's a benefit that the borrower would like. He'd like to be able to make sure that the lender just has one extra step that he's going to be nervous about before cheating him. V'amar Rava says the other way. The other way works the same thing as well. If you've got a person who's got two contracts, each worth 50, V'amar Shavinu Nili Chad Barmeya, I would like for this contract to now be one contract of 100. Lo Mashvina, we don't do that, because Avad Rabbana Milsa Denichele Lamalva Venichele Lova, this is going to be again good for the lender, good for the borrower. Nichele Lamalva, it's good for the lender because Kihechidilo Nifkun Shtare, he doesn't want to have to be forced to take an oath when he wants to collect. Venichele Lova, and it's good for the borrower, Kadeshilo Yachof Leporot, because he doesn't want to have to be under stress to have to pay this loan back because he's holding on to the receipt. So therefore, whatever way the loan was made, we leave it. Because any change to make 2 50s into a 100 or 100 into 2 50s could have its impact on both the lender and the borrower, so we don't do that. Amar Rav Ashi says, Haiman did not get shtara bar mea zuze. Let's say there's a person who's got a contract that says it's 100 zuz. V'amar shavinhu niali chad bar chamshin. He says, you know what? I'd like to be able to trade this in for one contract that says 50. Now, you'd think that would be okay because we have a concept of zachin la'adam shelo b'fanav. You can benefit a person when he's not there. Here is this lender, and he's being really generous. He's forgiving $50 of the loan, or at least he's admitting that $50 was paid. Either way, he's reducing the total value of the loan. What could be wrong with giving him that contract? The answer is, lo mashvinole, we do not do that. We do not allow him to trade in his 100 zuz contract for a 50 zuz contract. What's the reason? My timer. What's the reason? Good question. Amrin and I mifra par A, because we're gonna suggest the following may have happened. Let's say the borrower came to him and gave him the 100 zuz already. V'amar le havli shtarai, and he said, give me the contract back. V'amar le irkosli, and he says, I lost it. Now, because of litavra, the lender is going to write him a receipt for his 100 zuz loan. Now, mapik lehai, and he's going to take out a contract and he's going to say, what 100 zuz loan? I only have a loan that's for 50. Right? Because he's now got a contract that says 50. So this whole scheme that he's doing, right, is really to collect an extra 50. Not because, scammer. So therefore it's a scam. V'amar lei hayachrinu, he's going to say this is a completely different loan. So we don't let him do it. New Mishnah. Shnei achin. We've got two brothers. Echad ani v'echad asher. One is wealthy. One is poor and one is wealthy. V'hiniach len avihen merchatz ubeis habad. So the father leaves them as an inheritance a bathhouse or an olive press. Also l'schar, if the purpose of this bathhouse or this olive press was to rent out to people are renting, and then as an income. So then haschar le'emtza, they're going to split. Right? They should just split the rent that they get for the people that are using it. Also, but let's say it was a personal bathhouse or a personal olive press. The father was a wealthy person, and the father had plenty of olives to press. Or the father was a wealthy person. He had plenty of people in his household that he needed his own bathhouse for all the people. So therefore, now, Hare ha'asher omer lani, the rich brother says to the poor brother, and the poor brother basically has no use for it because he has no olives and he has no servants. What does he have? What does he have to use these things for? So he wants to sell it, or he wants to let other people in, or whatever he wants, or charge rent, right? He wants to do something with it. The rich person can say no, because the use that our father had designated was for personal use. He can say, he says, you have equal rights to it just like I do. Go ahead, purchase your own slaves, purchase your own olives, and make the stuff that you need. obviously he can't do that. But his point is that is what it's for. And so therefore, the fact that you can't do it because you don't have the money for it doesn't impose upon me, because that is the property that was left to us by our father. Shnaim shayu bi'irachas. Let's say there are two guys in a city. Shem echad Yosef ben Shimon v'shem echad Yosef ben Shimon. Both guys in the same city are named Yosef ben Shimon. Ein yachol l'hotzi shtar chov zel zeh. They cannot write a debt contract on each other. Right? We're going to see why, right? But you can already see where the confusion can happen.
Even if they have their own different signature?
Excellent question. Hang on to that for the end of the Mishnah. Another person can't collect from them either because they have the same name. So whatever person comes and says, hey, Yosef ben Shimon owes me money, the guy will look at him and say, who are you? Not me, maybe the other Yosef ben Shimon. And then he's going to have to prove it's Yosef ben Shimon, but the contract only says Yosef ben Shimon, so he's going to the other guy, and he'll have the same experience. Therefore, we cannot in this city write a contract knowing that this is going to be a problem. Let's say a person finds amongst his documents, the Gemara is going to presume in its original first question, although we'll change it, that the lender, right, finds amongst his documents that the contract of Yosef ben Shimon has been paid. He's got contract, he's Yosef ben Shimon, the contracts have been paid.
So the wrong one?
So that's going to be our question. Shtar Shnei and Purim, we're going to consider both contracts to both Yosef and Shimon's paid. Because even though we only have one of them that we know is paid, we don't know which loan it is, so we're going to have to assume it's both of them. But we'll hang on to that case until the Gemara explains it. Ketzad Yasu. So what should we do? Yehud already told us. Yeshalshu. Find what the third generation is. Yosef ben Shimon ben somebody else. V'im hayu mishulashim. Let's say they've got the same grandfather's name. Yichtavu Simon. Then they should have a signature. They should write some kind of an indication. They should be known. Yosef ben Shimon, the tall one. Yosef ben Shimon, the short one, right? Or poor, right? Well, that's going to be hard because they could wind up, their fortunes can change. You want something that's not going to change, ideally. V'im hayu misuman, and if they have the same things about them, yichtavu Kohen. Then see if one of them's a Kohen, one of them's Yisrael. You can write something, try to find some distinguishing characteristic. That would be a solution. Says the Gemara. I have to wipe the phone. Let's say there was a contract that came out in there was a contract that was brought out in the based in Rav Huna of Rav Huna, Dehava Ksiv Bey. It was written in that contract, Ani Ploni Bar Ploni Levisi Monem Imcha. I, so and so, the son of so and so, lent money to you, or borrowed money from you, and now this guy's got the contract. So Rav Huna says, Mimcha. Rav Huna said, who's you? You, afilu mireish galusa, it could even be the head of the Jewish community, va'afilu mishubar malka, or from the Persian queen. Could be anybody. Who's you? Whoever's holding this contract can come and collect it. This is a worthless contract. Amarli Rav Chisda the Rabba. Rav Chisda says to Rabba, poke ayin bay, go and investigate this case. I basically understand, because I know that Rav Huna is going to ask you in the morning what you think the halacha is on this case. It was a good case, it came up. So go do your investigation, do your research on this guy.
He forgets the case.
Well, he can't forget, it was the night before. Not going to forget overnight, right? Navak, he went out that night, and he investigated ve'ashkach, and he found Tanya was written in a brisa. Get sheyesh alav edim. Let's say you've got a divorce contract, and it's got witnesses on it. Ve'ein bozman, but it has no date on it, right? So Abba Shol says, Im kosev bo gerashtia hayom kosher. If it says we are divorced today, that is a kosher get. Now, why do we need to be able to write the get? Because what we want to be able to make sure isn't happening is the contract, the get shouldn't say, I'm going to divorce you in 4 years. Because then, even though we have a divorce contract, she's not divorced. So it has no date at all on it, it's invalid. But the fact is that it says from today, which means that at some point, whenever this get was given, it was a kosher get, because it was sealed and delivered on that day.
They're no longer together.
Right, now the question is, when is it considered? It's considered kosher. Now, Alma, that is to say, Hayomahu Yoma Dinafik Be Mashma. That day, Hayom, is today, the day that it came out, the day the contract came out. So Hachanami, Mimcha Meahu Gavra Dinafik, Mituta Yadeh Mashma. Same thing should be the case with this contract where it says to you, even though it's not clear who the you is, whoever the person who's holding it is considered to be, just like today, we consider that to be the day the contract, the get was valid from. So too, let's say it's the identical thing when it comes to a contract. To you means whoever happens to be the guy holding this contract. Amar le Abaye, Abaye says Vidilma Abashol Rabbi Eliezer Sfira le. Abaye says not a good proof because Abashol, maybe he holds like Rabbi Eliezer. Da Amar Edi Mesira Karsu, he learned on either Motzei Shabbos or Sunday morning. It all mushes together. But we had this concept of when is a contract valid? Is it valid from the time that the witnesses sign it, or is it valid from the time the witnesses hand over the contract?
When they hand over the contract.
So according to the opinion that says that you hand contract over, the witnesses signing on the document are really not important. Neither is a lot of what's written in the contract. You don't even need the date because you're going to ask the witnesses who witnessed when it was handed over, what day it was handed over. Right. That's all that's necessary. So maybe Abishol holds like Rabbi Eliezer, and that's why he doesn't require a good date. Maybe today is not a valid date, just like you is not a good valid person in a contract. So therefore today is not a valid date, and the only reason why Abishol says it's okay is because he's of the opinion that holds you don't even need a valid date in a get, because you're going to use Edi Masira, you're going to use the witnesses that hand the contract over, not the witnesses that sign it in any event. Avahacha, but here's our problem in this case. Our problem in our case with the contract that says you lechush linafila. We have another problem. The problem is we don't know if the guy who originally this contract was written to dropped it, and anybody could have found it. And so just because a person is coming with this contract that says you on it, it doesn't make him the rightful lender.
That's why you should put the name.
We definitely should, but somebody thought they were being quick and wrote, I owe you $100.
Whose fault would that be?
Well, but so you're going to say, well, whose fault? But he still can't make the guy pay without a proof. Amar le, so he said back to him, L'nefila lo chayshinon. That can't be the answer. We're not worried about contracts falling from one person and then being transferred over to another person. Tamra de lo chayshinon l'nefila. Where do you see that we're not worried about people dropping a contract and it being picked up by somebody else? What's your proof that we don't worry about that? Titznan, look at our Mishnah that we just learned. Our Mishnah says, Shnaim shayu b'yirachas. Let's say we had two people in one city. Shem echad Yosef ben Shimon v'Shem echad Yosef ben Shimon. Each one had the same name, Yosef ben Shimon, and the other one was named Yosef ben Shimon. Einan yecholin lahotzi shtarchov ze'al zeh. They cannot take out a loan document against each other. V'lo acher yochol lahotzi aleim shtarchov. And somebody else can't take out a contract against them either. Why? So heim alachirim yecholin, which means that why not? Because somebody can't prove that you're the guy who I owe the money to. You can't prove it to you. So, but that means that Yosef ben Shimon can take out a contract from somebody else. Somebody else, hey malachirim, they can say, you owe me money. You Shlomo owe Yosef ben Shimon money. Yeah, but how do you know you're Yosef ben Shimon that I owe to? You're only holding a contract that says Yosef ben Shimon. What if you dropped it and the other Yosef ben Shimon found it? So you see clearly from here, let's worry that one Yosef ben Shimon dropped it and the other Yosef ben Shimon found it. Elalav shmami, no, you can see clearly from this, l'nefila lo chashinon, we're not worried about one guy dropping it and another guy finding it.
Well, the only way to do it is if you were then Yosef ben Shimon later, Yosef ben Shimon.
That's what we want to do, right? So, but we know that that's not the case of the first part of the Mishnah, because the second part of the Mishnah suggests that as a solution. In the first part of the Mishnah, we're talking about if they didn't write that. So they didn't have anything other than Yosef ben Shimon. Nevertheless, Yosef ben Shimon can collect his contract because he's the one holding it, which indicates that we don't worry about the idea that Yosef ben Shimon dropped his contract and the other Yosef ben Shimon found it, which means that when somebody has a contract that says Shlomo owes you money, the you doesn't bother me, right? Because we're not worried that the guy who was the original person who wrote that contract, dropped it and then somebody else found it and now he's trying to collect it illegally. So Abai said to him, no, you got it mixed up here. L'nefila dechad lo chayshinon, l'nefila derabim chayshinon. Sure, you're right. We don't really worry about what happens if one guy is the only guy in the whole town who can collect it. What are you worrying about? Yosef ben Shimon dropped it, and it happened to be that the one guy in the whole city who found it was also Yosef ben Shimon. That we're not worried about. But when the contract says you, and one guy dropped it, and every other person who picks it up could collect with that contract, that's possible. So therefore, he says the reason why Rav Huna ruled in his Beis Din that this contract is not valid because we are chayshin and linafil. We do worry about a contract might fall from somebody and somebody else will pick it up. We're just not worried that it's going to be in a case. The other mission is talking about when there's two people with the exact same name. The likelihood that one guy who dropped it and the other guy who picked it up are both have the same name, that's very unlikely. Now, what about this? We learned in a brisa. Kishem she'ein. This is going to contradict our Mishnah. How do you understand? Okay, so this is great. This we got this issue. Fine. Our Mishnah indicated that Yosef ben Shimon can write a contract to collect from somebody else. Why? Because he's coming along with a contract. We know who the two parties are. Must be you, whose name is in the contract, and Yosef ben Shimon, the guy who's holding the contract, right? Because we're not worried that that he dropped it, and the other Yosef ben Shimon found it. But the reverse we can't do, right? Shlomo can't collect from Yosef ben Shimon, because in that case, Shlomo would have to prove who the other Yosef ben Shimon is, and he can't do that. So that's the case that our Mishnah says he can't do. But this brisa says not like that. This brisa has a different view. Just like Yosef ben Shimon cannot produce a contract to collect from each other, they're also not able to collect from other people. According to this brisa, Yosef ben Shimon cannot write a contract and have Shlomo pay them back because Shlomo can say, you're not the guy who I borrowed money from. I borrowed money from the other Yosef ben Shimon. Well, the question is, if we're not choshesh l'nefil, if Abaye, you're right, we're not worried that it dropped from one Yosef ben Shimon and the other Yosef ben Shimon found it, then what are we worried about? Why? How is it possible that this guy who's holding the contract isn't the rightful owner? Shouldn't the fact that he's Yosef ben Shimon and he's holding the contract be enough of a proof? Why can't he collect? So, b'mai kamlifagi, what is the point of dispute between our Mishnah and this brisa? So the answer is, ba'osios niknos b'mesira kamiflagi. It's our old friend, the argument about osios niknos b'mesira, whether the contract itself transfers the land or the car or the gift or not. How so? Because Tana Didon, our Mishnah, savar osios niknos b'mesira. They hold that if there is a second way that a contract could get from one Yosef ben Shimon to another, not just dropping it. What if he gives it to him as a gift? What if one Yosef ben Shimon says, oh, you know what? I'd like to hand you over this loan. Here's the document, and he hands it over to him. Well, if you hold that osios niknos b'mesira, just one Yosef ben Shimon handing that document over to the other fellow makes the new Yosef ben Shimon the rightful owner. And therefore, he can collect. Just as, by the way, if Yosef ben Shimon handed over to Meir ben David would also be allowed to collect. It doesn't matter, it just happens to be the same people with the same name, but that contract would be valid to collect. The name in the contract is not relevant. Who the original owner of the contract is not relevant. He could still make that collection. Right. That's what our Mishnah holds. The Tana Bra, but the Tana of the Brisa holds, Savar Einosios Niknos Mesira, that the letters in the contract can't be. So we have to worry, because this guy comes to collect the contract. We have to say, whoa, time out. How do we know that's your contract? Maybe you got this contract given to you by the other guy, and if you did that, this is not a valid transference, and you can't collect it. That's one way of looking at this argument.
What if there was a witness when he saw?
If witnesses help us all the time, right? Witnesses will help us, but they're not going to help us when it comes to transference of property, because here the document itself represents the loan. We need a kinyan of some sort. So if the witnesses saw him hand it over, that doesn't necessarily mean that the loan was transferred, right?
Right.
V'iboy sema. Second potential explanation for the dispute between our Mishnah and our Brisa is dekuliyam osios niknos b'mesira. Everyone agrees that if Yosef ben Shimon handed the contract over to the other Yosef ben Shimon, that would be a valid transference. Just like if one Yosef ben Shimon handed over to Meir ben David, that would be valid. It's the contract transfers the loan. That's not the issue. The question is, does the person who's the new owner of the contract have to bring a proof? This is where Yehuda's point comes in, right? The witnesses, what if I have witnesses? So now, according to this version, not only do I have to have the contract handed over to me, but I have to have some kind of proof that the contract was handed over to me, because we don't want somebody stealing a document and now being the new owner of the loan, right? We want to be able to make sure it was handed over properly. Tana Didon, Savar, our Mishnah holds Ein Tzarech Lahavi Raya, that you don't need to bring any kind of proof. Therefore, the fact that one guy named Yosef ben Shimon is holding a contract is enough of a proof that he's the rightful owner. The Tana Bra and the Tana of the Brisa holds Savar Tzarech Lahavi Raya, you're going to have to bring some kind of proof. Therefore, absence of proof, how do we know how you got this contract? You might not be the legal possessor of this contract, and we will not give you the loan. To Itmars, it says, Osios Nikna Mesira, that in the circumstance where we're using a contract document in order to transfer over to the property. Abaye says, Tzarech Lahavi Raya. Abaye says that in order to be able to collect with this document, especially since generally those documents don't have the real people's names that are involved in the transaction, in the document, you need to have some kind of proof that you're the rightful owner of it. Rava says, no, ain't no Tzarech Lahavi Raya. That's the way documents work. You're the person holding it. We presume that you are the rightful person, and you can use it to collect. Amar Abaye says, Mina Allah, where do I know I'm right, that I need to bring some kind of proof? Detanya, I'll show you a brisa. Echad mina achin. If we've got a circumstance, we've got two brothers, and Shashtar Chov Yotze Mitakas Yado Allah. So he says, what? And the brothers have this contract to be able to collect on, right? And this brother comes and he's going to use this contract to be able to collect on. Allah of Lahavi Raya. He has to bring a proof to the other brother that he is the one who really owns this contract. So now, my lav hu adin lachrini, let's say that bringing the proof that this brother is the real owner of this contract indicates that that's the case in all contracts. The fact that he has this contract doesn't necessarily indicate that he's the rightful owner of the contract. He has to bring some kind of proof. And just like the case of these brothers. The Rava says, no. He says, no, not so. Because he says, in this circumstance, Shani Achin Deshamtu Mehadadi. Brothers are different. Why? Brothers have a tendency to help themselves to each other's things. They share their things very, very liberally and take things from each other very liberally. Therefore,
and fight with each other.
And fight with each other very liberally. But the point is that the fact that one brother might be holding his brother's contract doesn't indicate that he's the rightful owner. Normally speaking, that would be enough. Normally speaking, I don't need to bring any proofs. But when it comes to brothers, the fact that brothers help themselves to each other's items means that I can't rely on the fact that one brother is holding the other brother's contract to indicate that he's the rightful owner of it. It could very well be one brother helped himself to the other brother's stuff, and that's why he's holding it. Therefore, the rabbi said, when it comes to brothers, we're going to be strict, and we'll make the brothers bring a proof.
Isn't that like stealing from your own brother, though?
That's exactly what it is. But we're saying that people that we all grew up together with our brothers, we've all been stealing from our brothers since we were very young. That's just the normal procedure, so nobody's going to think twice about it. So therefore, that's why we don't trust brothers to be able to make sure that the item that they're holding is theirs.
I don't blame them.
Ika de Amri, there are those who say the reverse, that the question was asked in reverse, that it was Amar Rava. Rava was the one who says, Minot Amin Allah, where do I know that you don't have to bring any proof? And he was from the same brisa that the brisa says to Tanya. One of the brothers brings a document of collection out from on the other brother, and he says, this is the document, and it proves that you owe me the money. So he has to bring a proof. So the answer, so Rava says, Achenhu deshamtu mehadadi. He says, of course brothers have to bring a proof. Why did they specifically choose brothers? Because they take each other's property. And that's why they had to bring a proof. Aval achrini, but if they were not brothers, it would not, you would not need any kind of proof. And so therefore he says, that's how I know you don't need any proof. If you're holding the document, that's sufficient. Abaye, and Abaye says, no. I'll tell you why the brisa needed to bring the case of brothers. It wasn't because brothers are different than everybody else. It would be that Salka Daita Chamina, I would have thought to say, Kaven Deshamtu Mehadadi. Brothers are different. They normally take each other's things. Therefore, Ema Mizdaher Zahiri. Therefore, the one brother would be extra careful to hide something that he doesn't want his brother to touch.
Therefore, know where all the hiding places are.
Well, he's extra careful, so he comes up with a new hiding place. So therefore, because he's extra careful, I might think that the brother doesn't need to have any kind of proof. So therefore, v'lo tzrichi lahavi raya, he doesn't need to bring any proof, kamash malon. So therefore, this comes to show me that just like everybody else, a brother needs to bring a proof. But Rav and Abaye are both having this argument about whether you need to bring proofs or not. Ve'ela, so rather, we're not going to have that brisa as a proof. Had Tanya will bring another brisa. Kishem shemotzi and hein shtarchov ala cherim. Our Mishnah says that just as this is a new brisa. This brisa argues with our Mishnah and on the brisa we brought before. This brisa says then not only can Yosef ben Shimon bring a document to collect from other people can indeed collect from them as well, which our Mishnah said they couldn't. So, Kishem Shemotziin Hein Shtarchov Al Acherim, just like they are able to have a loan document to collect from other people, Kach Motziin Zeh Al Zeh, they can even collect from each other. How did two Yosef ben Shimons be able to collect from each other? Are we not worried somehow that the documents got switched? But my kamifiki, what are they arguing about? What is the point of the argument between the Mishnah, our Mishnah, and our Brisa? The answer is because when shtar lelove afal pishain malva imo kamifligi. The argument between this Brisa and our Mishnah is based on the question of whether we can write a loan document in the presence of the lender without the borrower being there. Okay, why is that important? We'll see in a second. Just understand that what's happening is that the lender is saying, right, the borrower is having the document, I said it backwards. The borrower is writing the document without the lender being there. Okay. Now that sounds like it should be fine, because again, the borrower is benefiting the lender by creating a contract that creates a debt on himself. So why does he need the lender to be present? He can go into a place, he says, I want to borrow $100 from so-and-so, write the contract up, and I'll walk over to him and say, can you lend me $100? I've already got the contract written up. It'll be easy, it's simple, we'll just make the transaction, right? And we already know the Lov is going to pay for that contract anyway. We already learned that, so therefore, why can't that be? The answer is, we're going to wind up with the following problem. Tana di Don Sover, our Tana holds, Kosvin Shtar Lelov Alpha Pishain Malvaimo. He says, our Mishnah holds that that's fine. There's no problem with that. The lender can write such a document even without the lender being present. What is the worst thing that can happen? Only the worst thing that can happen is the lova could wind up not borrowing the money, and then the contract can find its way to the lender, and then the borrower will have to pay anyway. Well, the borrower is taking that risk. He's assuming that risk. He's writing the contract in order to entice the loan to take place. He's assuming that risk. Therefore, why should we have a problem with it? If he's ready to let us write that contract, that should be enough. But here's what we're going to worry about. Zimnin de ozil legabi safra vesadi v'amar lehu kisveli shtara deba'in lemezaf mi Yosef ben Shimon chavrai. There's a guy, Yosef ben Shimon. He walks into the Beis Din and he says, with witnesses, and he says, look, I want to borrow money from a guy, Yosef ben Shimon. Could you write a contract that says Yosef ben Shimon wants to borrow money from Yosef ben Shimon? And they say, sure, show us your ID. Look, I'm Yosef ben Shimon. Wonderful, thank you so much. Ubasar de kosvi v'chosmi. Then after they write the document and the witnesses sign it, right? Nikita le, he's going to take it. V'amarle havli mea diazavtaminai. He'll go to the next Beis Din and he'll say, hey, Yosef ben Shimon, I've got a contract signed by witnesses. You owe me 100.
Seriously?
Because it's Yosef ben Shimon is in the contract. Why not just flip the names? So that's what he can pull off. So the Tana Bra, so therefore that's why our Mishnah says they can't take out a loan on each other. Right? Because that can be done. But Tana Bra, but this Brisa doesn't have that problem. Savar ein kosvin shtar lelova ad sheyehe malveimo. Our Brisa says they could take out loans on each other. Why? Because they hold that we're not going to write a document for the lender, for the borrower, without the lender being present. So if the witnesses are signing the contract, they're going to see the two people that are involved in the case. So if this fellow tries to reverse it and flip it in Beis Din is going to call in the two witnesses and ask which one of these guys is the lender, which one is the borrower, and they'll solve the case, right?
So because they both have the same name.
But because the witnesses have seen the two people, that's why they both have to be present. Once they're both present, we don't have the issue.
Right.
Okay, now. Next thing to discuss from our Mishnah, last thing to discuss in our Mishnah, well, the second to last thing to discuss in our Mishnah is Nimtza lechad bein shtar osov shtar shel Yosef and Shimon parua shtar shneim pruin. If he's got in his documents, we're going to see who he is and who would where the documents where this item was found, that the contract of Yosef ben Shimon was paid. So then both contracts are paid to both Yosef ben Shimons. So now taima de nimtza. This seems to imply, we're going to assume, that the lender is the one finding this document. So it sounds like he finds the document, so now the documents don't have to get paid. Halo nimtza matzi mapik, which means that if he doesn't find this document, then he could collect. But we learned in the Mishnah that another person cannot take out a... Did I get backwards again? Got it backwards again. The borrower, right, has got the contracts of Yosef, and he finds amongst his contracts, right, that Yosef ben Shimon that the item is paid. So they'll say, but wait a second. What you're saying is because he takes this document and it says one of them is paid, now I don't have to pay. But confused because it says another, I did it again. Acher, not sure which way I'm saying it now. I've got myself confused because I went too fast. That the Acher is not allowed to take out a contract saying that Yosef ben Shimon owes them. Okay, so let's make sure I said it right. Yosef ben Shimon, both of them are the borrowers. He's a creditor. He has contracts to Yosef ben Shimon. He has a document. He's the lender, and he has this document that says Yosef ben Shimon, one of the Yosef ben Shimon documents is paid. So therefore, he cannot now collect from both of those documents. The question is, even without that document, he still wouldn't have been able to collect from Yosef ben Shimon because we said in the Mishnah that he would never be able to prove which Yosef ben Shimon is written in each contract. Maybe both of these contracts are for one of them or the other one. Or
they're both there at the same time.
Well, even regardless of whether they're there or not, the contract cannot be written. That's what our Mishnah says. You cannot write a contract for two Yosef ben Shimons to say, Yosef ben Shimon owes me money. We cannot do that. So therefore, Tanan, we learn in our Mishnah. So it says that Velo acher yochel lahotzi alei and shtarchov tanan. Our Mishnah says that a person cannot ever collect a contract from a Yosef ben Shimon when there's two Yosef ben Shimons. So what difference does it make if there happens to be a document saying one of them is paid? Even if there's no document that says one of them is paid, nobody's ever going to be able to collect this contract. So Rabbi Yirmiyah explains, Bash meshu loshen. What's going on here is that the third name is written, so it's clear which contract belongs to which one. So v'nichsei tavra b'shma deman dekasiv. So okay, well if the three names are written, then look at the receipt also. You'll know which one is the proper one who the receipt was. Look at the receipt; it's also written there. So Rav Hoshaya says b'mishuloshin b'shtar v'mishuloshin b'shover. The answer is the contracts are written with the third name, so it was clear which contract was written to who. But the receipt was just written Yosef ben Shimon, so we just don't know who the receipt goes to. Right? So in his notes, he's got Yosef ben Shimon paid the debt. But now he doesn't know which of the two Yosef ben Shimons, so he cannot collect the debt. But otherwise, he would have been able to collect the debt because there's a third name on each of those contracts. Abai says, no, that's the problem. That's not the right way to explain this Mishnah. This is what the Mishnah means to say. This is actually the borrower who finds amongst his contract. Remember, the borrower is allowed to borrow from Yosef ben Shimon. That wasn't a problem. Yosef ben Shimon was allowed to lend somebody else money. So if the borrower has two contracts that he says that he knows that he owes Yosef ben Shimon, he's got a receipt that says the Yosef ben Shimon contract is paid, and then that receipt can be used to cover both outstanding contracts against him. Okay, now, last thing in the Mishnah, Ketzad Yasu, what you do, Yishalishu, you should write the third name, right? Yosef ben Shimon ben so-and-so. Tano, we learned, Hayushneim Kohanim, so let's say the two of them are Kohanim, Yichtavu Doros. Then you can write further generations back, however far you need to go in order to find something that indicates there's a difference between them, right? Fourth generation, fifth generation. At some point, you got to find some place where there's a distinction. Next Mishnah. Ha'omer libno, somebody says to his son, Shtar bein shtarosai parua, right? He says, one of the contracts that are in my library, my documents, right? He's a shriv meira, he's ready to die. Okay, that's what's going on. So he's giving instructions to his son who's going to take over all of his debts, and he says, you're going to see a pile of contracts, right? One of those contracts is paid. Veini odea ezehu, and I do not know which one. Shtaros kulan porin. So then he's got to assume all of them are paid. He can't collect on any of them because maybe that's the one that was already paid. Nimtza, he's got to prove, right? And he can't prove which one. Nimtza le'echad shem nimtza le'echad sham shnaim hagadol parua v'katan ena parua. Let's say he's got two contracts there, and he says one of them is but to one person, right? Nimtza le'echad sham shnayim. He has to one person. Let's say in this pile of documents, he's got two contracts to one individual. Well, now at least one of them is valid because only one contract wasn't valid. So he can collect one of those two contracts. Which one does he collect? Whichever one is the lesser amount, right? Because we always say that the person holding the contract, he's the one who has to prove. He knows that one of them isn't valid. He can't prove which one. So we're going to assume that the one that has the lesser value is the one that's kosher because worst comes to worst, it's the one with the greater amount. And he's allowed at least to have this amount, right? So therefore, we're going to allow him to collect the lower amount. Says the Gemara, Rava. Rava says, Shtar lecha biyadi parua, right? The contract that's in my hand is paid. Hagodol parua v'katon eno parua. So if he's got two contracts, the one that has the larger amount is considered to be paid. The one with the smaller amount is not paid. Chov lecha biyadi parua. If the person says that the debt that is in my possession, so shtar's kuan paruin, then both of the contracts are considered paid. Why? Because when you said contract, we've got two separate contracts. When you say debt is a collective term that includes all of the contracts. So therefore, it could be both of them are paid, therefore he can't collect on either one. Amar li Ravina Rava. Ravina says to Rava, Ela me'ata, according to that true. Sadai mechuralach. What about the case if a person says, my field is sold to you? And he writes in a contract, my field is sold to you. Sada gedola mechuralo. So then the larger, he says, then the larger field is sold. Sada sheyesh li mechuralach. So then kol sadosav mechurin lo. So he says, but now if he says though that the fields that I have are sold to you, or it's not plural, right? The field that I have is sold to you. So then all of his fields are considered to be sold because that field sadeh is a collective term that may include all of them. So now the question is, why is it that the larger field is considered sold in this circumstance? So the answer is because we're going to apply a principle consistently. Hasam yad balashtar ala tachtona. Whoever is the guy who is holding the contract, he's the guy who loses. And in this case, the guy is holding the contract and he says, I sold a piece of land. It is the responsibility of the person holding the document. He has to prove that it was the smaller piece of land, because his contract doesn't specify it. So if his contract doesn't specify, we're always going to give the benefit to the other person, not the contract holder.
Shouldn't all the contracts be specific about?
Ideally, that's the key, right? The key is always don't make a mistake, hire a good sofer so that you don't wind up in this circumstance. But when it comes to the loan, the contract holder is collecting. Therefore, the contract owner is right. And this is the case of the field. The contract guy is the guy selling. But if he's the guy who's collecting, then he can only collect the lesser amount of the loan.
At the same time, he should put more detail on the contract.
Definitely, that's where the mistake is. Says the next Mishnah, Malvis Chaver al Yedei Orev. Somebody new. This is the next sugi, the next group of issues that we're going to be dealing with for a little bit is somebody who loans to a friend and he has an Orev. An Orev is a guarantor, third party who guarantees that if this guy, it sounds like an Orev, guarantees if he doesn't pay, I will.
Third parties never get signed.
Third parties are great for loans, right? Because it provides security. So somebody says, you don't pay, my friend doesn't pay, I will be the guarantor. Lo yifram in Orev, you can never collect from the guarantor. Now we'll explain, the Gemara is going to explain what that means, right? Cannot collect from the guarantor. V'im amar lo almanas she'efra mimi she'ertza. If he writes, right, in the conditions, the lender writes in his conditions, I will give you this loan on condition that I can collect from whoever I want. So then Yifram and Orev, then he can collect from the guarantor. Rav Gamliel says, Im yesh nechasim lelove, if the lender has possessions, bein kak lo Yifram in Orev, then it doesn't matter either way. He cannot collect from the guarantor. Always go to the borrower first. That's what Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, and you can see clearly this mission is already going to have some rewrites coming up in the Gemara. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, Ha'arev le'isha biksuba sa. Let's say somebody is a guarantor for a woman who has a ksuba. Let's say, for example, somebody says to the woman doesn't want to marry this husband. She says, even if he divorces me, I come to collect the ksuba. He's a poor guy. He's not going to be able to pay his ksuba. So his friend says, don't worry. I'll stand in. I'll be the Arev. I'm the guarantor. If he can't,
and then when you have cash, he'll
be the
cash.
Yes, that's what happens in the art. But now she says, great. So then I'll get married, and if I get divorced and my husband can't pay, you'll be the guarantor. Great. But v'haya ba'al megarsha, the husband divorces her. Now, yadireno hana. So the husband has to, in order for the guarantor to pay, the husband has to take an oath that he will not get any benefit in the future from this woman. Why? Because Shema Yasu Knunya al Nechosim Shel Zev Yachzir Ishto. Maybe the whole thing's a trick. The husband and wife are poor. She says, I got a great idea. We'll get divorced. We'll go to your friend and get my ksuba. Then we'll have a lot of money. We'll get remarried and we'll live happily ever after.
They're scammers.
Right?
Sure.
So therefore, we make it so that they have to promise they can't get remarried afterwards so that the divorce is real. Okay? Says the Gemara. My taima. What is the reason why the Mishnah says that an Arev can never collect? Rav and Rav Yosef Damar Tavayu. Rav and Rav Yosef both say, Gavra ashlimos li, Gavra ashlimi loch. The answer is because, what is a guarantor saying? Guarantor saying, you need me to guarantee that this person will show up to pay his loan. Well, here he is. So as long as he's present, whether he pays or he doesn't pay, is not my problem. I'm just guaranteeing that he's here. Right? Now, if the guy goes and travels and runs away, okay, fine, then you can collect from me. But the guy being here is all that's necessary. Maskifla Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman asked a question on that. Hi, Dina de Parsoi. That sounds like a Persian rule. Says Adarabba. What do you second? The Gemara says turn out Persian rule. That's not Adarabba. That exactly opposite. Basra Arva Osli. The Persians have some wacky rules when it comes to land ownership. They had a rule that actually the guarantor is who you go to first when there's a loan. You don't even go to the borrower. You go right to the Arev. So you're not saying a Persian rule. So he says, Ella. No, he says, Bey Dina de Parsoi. What I mean is, you're like a Persian court because the Persian rules don't make a lot of sense. So your law makes no sense. Delo Yahavi Taimelim Ilsayu. You've got a rule here that you can't explain why you're saying it. What do you mean? The guy's a guarantor and the person's not paying. How do you not collect from the guarantor? That is what a guarantor is. Ella Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, My lo yifra min Arev. How do you explain our Mishnah? What does it mean when you say that you will not be able to get payment from the guarantor? Lo yitva Arev techilo. You cannot go to him first. You have to go to the borrower first to get the money first. Tanya Nami Yachu. We have a brisa that says like that as well. Hamalves chavera yedei Arev. If somebody lends money through his friend, through a guarantor, lo yitva Arev techilo. You cannot go to the guarantor first. Ve'im amar al menashe from misharetza, and this is what our Mishnah says. And if, however, I say, I'm making a condition that I will go to whoever I want, the guarantor or you first. So then yitva Arev techila, then you can go to the guarantor first. Okay, Amar Rav Huna. Minayin la'arev demishtabeid. How do I know that such a rule exists? An arev guarantor can obligate himself in a loan that he's not even involved in?
It's written.
Dichsiv, it is written. Anochi ervenu miyadi tivak shenu, says Yehuda. When Yosef is being taken, when Binyamin is being taken away from his father. So he says to Yaakov, I am going to be the guarantor. And you can seek it out from me if I don't give him back. Maskif Rav Chisda says, HaKablanos that's not a Orev. That's a different level. That's called a kablan. A kablan, we're going to see, is a different level of guarantor, a higher level of guarantor. And Yehuda was actually being a higher level of guarantor. Dichsiv, because the pasuk says, Tna oso al yadai vani ashivenu. Reuven told Yaakov, give Binyamin to me and I will return him. And the word give indicates this higher level of responsibilities we're going to see in the Gemara that we're going to learn tomorrow. That give indicates a higher level. Basically, I'm saying, you are in a kablan is saying, not only am I guaranteeing this loan, I'm saying, give the money to him, you're my shaliach, which means that I'm actually giving the money over, you're lending me the money to give over to him. Therefore, this transaction requires me to pay you. That's a different type of a guarantee. Right? Elamar Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak says, "Me pasuk lachak b'do ki arev zar u'ba'ad nachriya chavlehu." That in Mishlei it says somebody takes a garment because he is a guarantor, and on behalf of a stranger he will be afflicted. Vomer, it says, "B'ni." My son, if you become an arev, a guarantor for your friend, and you clap your hand on behalf of a stranger, no kashta be'imri picha, or you have spoken badly about a person, and you have tripped over your mouth and you have made him feel bad. Asezos, this is what you should do. Efo b'ni vehinat sel, this is what you should do, my son, and you will be saved. Kibata bekaf reyacha. Lech hatarfes v'rahav reyacha. Imamon yeshlo biyadcha. Hater lo, if you've got money in your possession that belongs to him, open your hand and give it to him. Pisas yad, then you should open your hand. Ve'im lav, but if not, harbei lav reim, and if it was the issue of speech that you said something to hurt somebody's feelings, then send many friends to apologize. Right? He may not want to see you, but send a friend, and then send another friend, send another friend. But the bottom line is, from Mishlei, we see this concept of the arev, of the guarantor, is here. That if you have money in behalf, that you've guaranteed on behalf of somebody else, in Mishlei it says, open your hand and pay it. Amar Meimar says, Arev de Mishtabed, this concept of whether an Arev works or not, a guarantor works or not, is Machlokas Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yossi, is actually tied to the old argument of Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yossi that we've seen before. The Rabbi Yossi Damar, Asmachta Kanya. Rabbi Yossi says, an Asmachta, what was an Asmachta? An Asmachta is when I say that I'm going to do something, but I don't really mean I'm going to do it. I'm only using this thing that I'm going to do to prove how serious I am that I'm going to do what I really want to do. Meaning, the guarantor really has zero intention of repaying this loan. He's saying, I will repay the loan if he doesn't, because he's so sure that he will repay the loan. Right. I'm so sure that he's going to repay the loan, I'll give you the money if he doesn't. But I don't mean it. I have zero intention of repaying. This, says Rabbi Yossi, is an asmachta. This is an asmachta. An asmachta is kanya. Even though that's not what you intended to do, you didn't intend to pay, you said it, you're in. You have to pay it.
What's kanya? What does that mean?
He acquires it. And Arev Mishtabed, so he says, therefore, that is Arev is Mishtabed. Therefore, according to Rabbi Yossi, a guarantor is enslaved, literally, right? He's in it. Rabbi Yehuda Damar Asmachta lo kanya, but Rabbi Yehuda says Asmachta does not work. Arev lo Mishtabed, and therefore a guarantor is not captured by this. Amar le Ravashi lamim, or Ravashi says to Amaymar, Hamais b'chol yom dasmachta lo kanya. We have halacha cases all the time. We don't hold like Rabbi Yossi. We know an asmachta is not kona. The arev mishtabed, and nevertheless, we know that it's unrelated because we know that an arev is subjugated and does have to pay. So it's not related to that argument. El Amar Ravashi, Ravashi says, Bahu hanod dekamahiman le gamar mishtabed nafshe. The answer is, this is what he's doing. The guarantor is so happy that somebody thinks so highly of his credits that somebody's willing to lend money to somebody else because he said so. That's a benefit. That's like pumps up his business in the eyes of others. He's so happy about that, to be able to be a guarantor on it, that he's willing to actually trade that for the responsibility of paying. And that's why it acquires, right? He's actually trading the reputation for the guarantee. Now, the next part of the Mishnah says, if a person says, on condition that I will be able to get it from whoever I want, in that circumstance, we say that he can go to the guarantor first. Rabbi Yochanan says, this only works if the borrower has no money. If the borrower in fact does have money, lo yifram an orev, then even if he makes this claim, so then the guarantor is not responsible. Wait a second. Can I say for the next part of the Mishnah says, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, im yesh nechasim lelova, lo yifram an orev, that only Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is the one who says that if the borrower does not have money, then the guarantor pays. But if he does have money, then the guarantor does not pay. That the Tanakama, the person who's in the first part of the Mishnah, says it makes no difference. You can always get money. You can always collect from the borrower, you can always collect from the guarantor, even if the borrower does have money. So the answer is, we have to rewrite the Mishnah slightly in order to make it make sense, and here's how it works. Person lends money to his friend, and he has a guarantor. Lo yifra min ha'arev, he cannot collect money from the guarantor, which we said first. V'im amar al menashe efra, if he said that on condition that I can get payment, mimi sheretza, from anybody I want, yifra min ha'arev, then he can collect from the guarantor even first. But medvar mamurim, when do we say that? B'she'ein nechasim l'lova. That is only when the borrower has no money. Right? Aval, yesh nechasim l'lova. If the borrower has money, lo yifra min ha'arev, then you can't go to the guarantor. The kablon, however, now we throw in a new item. However, when it comes to a kablon,
what's kablon?
Kablon is this higher level of guarantor, which we're going to describe in tomorrow's page. Afal pi sheyesh nechasim l'lova, even if, see, the kablon, even if the borrower has money, right? Afal pi sheyesh nechasim l'lova, yifra min a kablon, you can in fact collect from a kablon. To which Reb Shimon Gamliel said, Im yesh nechasim l'lova, then if there's money, if the borrower has money, echad zeh ve'echad zeh lo yifra mehen, then you cannot collect from a kablon, you cannot collect from an arev, right? Whereas the Tanna Kama makes a distinction, you cannot collect from an arev if the lova has money, but, right, sorry, I should translate, you cannot collect from the guarantor if the borrower has money, but you can collect from a kablon if the borrower has money. And Rosh Gamliel says it does not matter. As long as the borrower has money, you can never go and collect from a kablon, you can never go and collect from an arev. Stop here?
Sounds good.
All right.
Wow. That was